There is something almost no doctor tells you clearly when you turn 50, 60, or 70 years old. It is not about your cholesterol. It is not about your blood pressure. It is about something you are probably overlooking right now at this exact moment. Most people believe that dementia begins with memory. They believe that the day they start forgetting names, misplacing their keys, or getting lost on a familiar route, that will be the day to worry. But neurologists know something that you might not know yet. By the time memory fails in a visible, undeniable way, the brain has been sending completely different signals for years, sometimes for more than a decade. Signals that have absolutely nothing to do with remembering or forgetting, and almost no one recognizes them. Today we are going to talk about those 5 early signals. I am not sharing this to scare you. I am sharing this because understanding these signs could literally be the difference between reaching your 80s with your mind intact or not. Make sure you watch until the end because the 5th sign is the one that surprises people the most, and it is by far the easiest one to ignore. Before we dive into the first sign, I need you to know something. What I am going to tell you today is not designed to make you leave this video paralyzed with fear. Quite the opposite. What you are going to learn in the next few minutes is exactly what I would explain to my own parents if they came to me asking, how do I know if what I'm experiencing is just normal aging or something else? That difference exists, it is real, and it has a name. Neurologists call it the window of opportunity. This is that golden period of time when the brain is still plastic enough, still adaptable enough, that certain lifestyle changes and early medical interventions can make a massive, measurable difference. But that window does not stay open forever. The problem is that during this window, the warning signs do not look like what we expect from the movies. They are not dramatic. They are not obvious. They are subtle, everyday occurrences. They are so normal that patients themselves, and often their primary care doctors, simply attribute them to getting older. We are going to change that right now. 5 signals, explained calmly, without unnecessary medical jargon, and with all the honesty you deserve. The first sign has to do with something almost no one would ever connect to the brain. Have you ever noticed that certain smells just don't reach you the way they used to? Maybe your morning coffee doesn't smell quite as rich and intense as it did 5 years ago. Maybe you take longer to notice that something is burning in the kitchen. Or maybe a family member has complained that the dinner you cooked has way too much salt, garlic, or spice, and you barely even taste it. Perhaps you blamed it on seasonal allergies, a past sinus infection, or you simply ignored it because, after all, what does your nose have to do with your brain? It has everything to do with it. And this is the first crucial thing you need to understand today. Before you panic, losing a tiny bit of olfactory sensitivity with age is relatively common. Smell is one of the senses that naturally dulls slightly as the calendar turns. That is perfectly normal. But there is a monumental difference between losing a little bit of sharpness and the neurological shift I am about to describe. The olfactory nerve, that delicate bundle of fibers connecting your nasal cavity directly to your brain, is, according to leading researchers, the very first highway that diseases like Alzheimer's used to enter the central nervous system. Yes, you heard that right. One of the most solid theories in modern neurology suggests that the abnormal proteins that cause dementia actually begin accumulating in the olfactory pathways long before they spread to the hippocampus, which is the memory center. Major studies following thousands of seniors for over a decade have found something incredibly consistent. Those with a significant unexplained loss of smell had a considerably higher risk of developing cognitive decline in the following years. I remember a patient I will call Eleanor. She was 68 years old, absolutely sharp, with a memory she proudly described as like a steel trap. She came in for a completely different issue, but in passing, she said something that caught my attention. For the past 2 years, I've had to heavily season my food. If I don't practically cover it in hot sauce, it just tastes like cardboard. We started investigating. It was not a nasal polyp. It was not a lingering cold. It was neurological. Eleanor was showing the earliest biological whispers of a process that, had we not caught it, would have advanced silently for years. Today, she is on an aggressive preventative protocol and remains completely independent. But what impacted me most wasn't her diagnosis. It was what she asked me. Why didn't anyone tell me this? The danger of early signs is exactly that. They seem too trivial to matter, but smell is only the beginning. If you thought the sense of smell was surprising, wait until you hear the second sign. If you or someone you love has experienced this, you need to pay very close attention. The second signal has to do with your dreams. Has anyone ever told you that you move violently while you sleep? That you talk, shout, punch, kick, or seem to be fighting off an invisible attacker? Or perhaps you are the one lying awake at night because your partner, who used to be a peaceful sleeper, now thrashes around the bed? Sometimes the person remembers having incredibly vivid cinematic dreams, dreams where they are fleeing from a threat, protecting a child, or running a race. And while they are doing it in their dream, their physical body is doing it in the bed. In medicine, this has a very specific name, REM Sleep Behavior Disorder, and it is one of the most powerful premonitory signs of neurodegenerative disease we have ever discovered. Let's clarify something immediately. Not everyone who has a nightmare or restless legs has this disorder. Tossing and turning is common. What we are describing is a highly specific physical acting out during the deep REM phase of sleep. Under normal, healthy conditions, when you enter REM sleep, your brainstem sends a signal to paralyze your muscles. This is a brilliant evolutionary protective mechanism. It ensures that you do not physically act out what your brain is imagining. But when that mechanism fails, it is a glaring red flag. When deposits of an abnormal protein called alpha-synuclein begin to build up in the brainstem, that paralysis switch breaks. This specific protein is the hallmark of diseases like Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia. The statistics on this are frankly staggering. Studies show that up to 80 to 90% of people diagnosed with true REM sleep behavior disorder will go on to develop a neurodegenerative condition in the years or decades that follow. It is a story played out in neurology clinics worldwide. A couple in their late 60s comes in. The husband has been screaming and throwing punches in his sleep for 5 years. They thought it was just stress or bad dreams from watching the evening news. By the time they finally see a doctor, it isn't for the sleep, it's because a slight tremor has appeared in his hand or he has become stiff and slow. The most insidious part of this signal, the person doing the thrashing rarely wakes up from it. They have no idea it's happening unless they share a bed. If someone tells you that you are acting out your dreams, do not brush it off as stress. Bring it to a doctor. Time is of the essence. If the first two signs were surprising, this third one is the most tragic, because it is the one most commonly misunderstood by families. It breaks relationships, causes arguments, and almost always gets blamed on the wrong thing. It has nothing to do with forgetting things. It has to do with character. Do you know someone, or maybe it's you, who over the last few years seems to have lost all interest in the things they used to love? They don't go out as much. They don't call their friends. The hobbies that define them, gardening, woodworking, reading, golfing, have slowly vanished. Not with a dramatic breakdown, not with tears, but simply fading away. When you ask them about it, the answer is usually, I'm just getting older, or I just don't have the energy, or nothing really interests me lately. What I have just described is not sadness, it is not depression, it is called apathy, and its presence in late middle age is one of the most underestimated signs of early cognitive decline. To be absolutely clear, apathy is incredibly common and has many triggers. Chronic pain causes apathy. Grief causes it. A thyroid issue causes it. Even certain blood pressure medications can cause it. But what neurologists look for is a specific type of apathy, an apathy that appears out of nowhere without a clear emotional trauma and simply refuses to leave. In the context of cognitive decline, apathy reflects a very specific mechanical failure in the brain. It shows a decrease in activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area just behind your forehead responsible for motivation, initiation, and goal-directed behavior. When the prefrontal cortex begins to struggle, the result isn't memory loss, it is the loss of drive. Researchers followed older adults for over 12 years and found that those who showed significant apathy without any memory issues whatsoever were nearly 3 times more likely to develop dementia. I think of a man I'll call Robert. He was 72. He had been a vibrant, curious man who built model ships and loved debating politics. His daughter brought him in, and she said something that broke my heart. It's not that Dad is sad. It's like someone just reached inside and unplugged him. He would sit in his recliner for 6 hours straight, not reading, not watching TV, just looking, without seeing. His family thought he was just struggling with retirement, but cognitive tests revealed the truth. His frontal lobes were shutting down. The greatest danger of apathy is that it is self-limiting. The person suffering from it doesn't want to go to the doctor because they don't want to do anything. It is up to the family to recognize that losing your spark isn't always a psychological issue. Sometimes it is deeply neurological. This brings us to the fourth signal. In my experience, this is the sign that causes the most anguish for families. It doesn't look like a disease. It looks like the person is becoming rude, strange, or difficult. Have you noticed someone close to you starting to say things they never would have said in the past? Inappropriate comments to strangers in public, laughing at a funeral or during a serious conversation, a sense of humor that has suddenly become crude, harsh, or cruel, a sudden explosive irritability over incredibly minor inconveniences. Or perhaps they are engaging in bizarrely childish behaviors, buying expensive things impulsively online, eating massive amounts of sweets without control, or abandoning lifelong moral beliefs overnight. Families usually sit in my office and say, "He's acting crazy," or, with deep shame, "I don't even recognize my mother anymore." Again, context is everything. Getting older can make us a bit cranky, less tolerant of nonsense, and more likely to speak our minds. That is normal aging. But what we are talking about here is a radical departure from the person's lifelong personality. There is a region of your brain whose entire job is to act as the brakes. It is called the orbitofrontal cortex. It evaluates the consequences of what you are about to say before you say it. It keeps your behavior socially acceptable. When these neurological brakes begin to fail, which is the hallmark of a condition called frontotemporal dementia, the result is disinhibition. The person loses their filter. The tragedy of this sign is that the patient has no idea they are acting inappropriately. From their perspective, they are just being brutally honest or spontaneous. I once saw a 58-year-old executive who had always been the epitome of professionalism. Over 18 months, he began making crude comments to his female employees, started shoplifting candy bars from the gas station, and laughed when his brother announced he had cancer. His wife was ready to divorce him. His company fired him. Everyone thought he was having a midlife crisis or a psychiatric breakdown. It took 2 years for someone to finally do a brain scan and realize his frontal lobes were atrophying. It wasn't his fault. His brain was changing without his permission. This is vital to know because frontotemporal dementia often strikes early, in people in their 50s or early 60s. If a loved one's personality undergoes a radical, inappropriate shift, do not assume they have suddenly become a bad person. Look at the brain. We have reached the fifth signal, the one I told you to wait for, the one that requires no special tests, that is physically visible to anyone, and that almost every doctor completely misses. It has to do with how you walk. Have you noticed someone's walking pattern changing? Maybe their steps have become shorter, more cautious, more shuffling. They walk as if they are terrified of falling, even on a flat, dry carpet. Or perhaps there is a subtle hesitation. Tiny pause when they try to step over a threshold or change directions. Or maybe when you are walking and talking with them, you notice that they have to physically stop walking in order to finish their sentence. You probably blamed it on a bad knee, a sore hip, or just getting old. But listen carefully. Walking is, neurologically speaking, one of the most incredibly complex tasks the human brain performs. Every time you take a single step, your brain is simultaneously calculating spatial awareness, balance, depth perception, obstacle anticipation, and motor planning. It requires your basal ganglia, cerebellum, motor cortex, and hippocampus to fire in perfect harmony. When those brain regions begin to struggle, the feet show it long before the memory does. Research has coined a term for this, motoric cognitive risk syndrome. Studies show that a slowing of walking speed combined with memory complaints is one of the most accurate predictors of future dementia. There is a specific phenomenon called the dual task gait assessment. In a healthy brain, you can walk and talk effortlessly. But in the earliest stages of cognitive decline, the brain loses processing power. It has to choose. If a senior person consistently has to stop walking just to answer a question, it is a clinical red flag. There is also something called a magnetic gait. This is when a person walks with small shuffling steps, barely lifting their feet off the ground, as if their shoes were magnetized to the floor. This is a classic sign of normal pressure hydrocephalus, a type of dementia caused by fluid on the brain that, amazingly, is often completely reversible if caught early. Far too often, when an older person falls, we treat it as a bone or muscle problem. We give them calcium, a walker, and physical therapy. But we rarely stop and ask, why did the brain fail to coordinate the feet? Falls are not always accidents. Often, they are neurological warning signs. So you now have the 5 signals: the fading of the sense of smell, physical acting out during dreams, unexplained sudden apathy, the loss of social filters and personality shifts, and changes in walking patterns and hesitation. Not one of them is memory loss, and every single one of them can appear years before a diagnosis. Now, I want you to take a deep breath. I do not want you leaving this video analyzing every single time you stumble or every time you can't smell a candle perfectly. The human body is complex. You can have a bad sense of smell and never get dementia. You can feel unmotivated for months and just need a vacation. This is about patterns, not isolated incidents. The reason I am sharing this is not to give you anxiety. It is to give you power. We live in an extraordinary time in medicine. 20 years ago, a dementia diagnosis was just a tragedy we observed. Today, we know that up to 40% of dementia cases are linked to modifiable risk factors. If you or a loved one notices these early signs, you are standing in that beautiful window of opportunity. This is the time to act. Move your body. Aerobic exercise, walking fast, swimming, cycling, actually increases the size of your hippocampus. It pumps literal growth factors into your brain. You don't need to run a marathon, you just need to be consistent. Protect your sleep. Sleep is not a luxury. During deep sleep, your brain's lymphatic system opens up and literally washes away the toxic proteins that cause Alzheimer's. Chronic poor sleep is an invitation for cognitive decline. Challenge your brain. Forget crossword puzzles if you already know how to do them. Your brain needs novelty. Learn a language, try to play an instrument, take a different route home. Discomfort is where neuroplasticity happens. Check your hearing. Uncorrected hearing loss is one of the biggest risk factors for dementia because it socially isolates you and understimulates the brain. Get hearing aids if you need them. You have the tools. You know the signs. Dementia does not have to be an inevitable destiny. If you found this information valuable, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Not to scare them, but because this information gives families the power to seek help when it actually matters. If you want to continue learning how to protect your brain as you age, you need to watch my next video. We are going to discuss 2 incredibly common over-the-counter pills that millions of people take every single day, which have recently been linked to an increased risk of Alzheimer's after 60. You might have them in your medicine cabinet right now. Click the video on the screen to watch it now. Let me know in the comments if you or a family member have experienced any of these 5 signs. I read every comment and do my best to reply. Stay healthy, stay curious, and I will see you in the next video. The content of this video is for informational and educational purposes only. It does not constitute a medical diagnosis, clinical advice, or a substitute for a consultation with a qualified healthcare professional. The signs described have multiple possible causes and can only be correctly interpreted within the context of an individualized medical evaluation. If you have concerns about your cognitive health or that of a family member, always consult your physician or a neurology specialist.